After an argument, my daughter canceled my ticket and left me alone at the international airport in Dubai with no phone, no wallet, and no way to call for help. A man who looked like a billionaire, impeccably dressed, walked toward me and whispered, "Pretend to be my wife. My driver is about to arrive." Then he added, "Your daughter will regret leaving you here." He was right, and I had no idea just how true those words would become. The worst part was that she did it while looking straight into my eyes, smiling coldly as she clutched my handbag to her chest, like a trophy. I stood there in the brightly lit terminal, surrounded by people speaking languages I couldn't understand. The icy air from the vents made my skin prickle with panic. The fluorescent lights burned my eyes. The heavy scent of expensive perfume mixed with the bitterness of strong coffee making my empty stomach twist. I was 68 years old, wearing a wrinkled beige silk blouse, and could feel my blood pressure climbing. My fingertips tingled, a sign I was close to fainting. 15 minutes earlier, my daughter Renata had exploded right there at the check-in counter. She yelled that I was a burden, that I drained her energy, that she was sick of funding my luxuries. Luxuries. I repeated that word in my mind as I glanced at the travelers pulling designer suitcases around us. I was there because I had saved every penny of my pension for 2 years just to fulfill one small dream. To start this trip, I dreamed about beginning with the desert at sunset, to remind myself that the world was still vast beyond the walls of my home. But Renata insisted on coming to make sure you don't blow your money and come begging again. I agreed because deep down, some fragile part of me still hoped that this trip might bring us closer, that maybe we could talk honestly, that maybe she'd stop looking at me with that silent resentment. I never understood. The argument began when I asked the airline clerk if I could change my seat to one by the window. A simple question, yet Renata took it as an insult because she paid for the entire trip. She leaned close, her voice icy. "Your pathetic mother. Always have been." Then she smiled sweetly at the attendant, as if nothing had happened. "Dad died because he wanted to escape you. You know that he just wanted to breathe in a world without your mediocrity." My heart clenched. My husband George had died 25 years earlier in a car accident, and ever since Renata had weaponized that grief against me. I tried to take a deep breath to keep from crying, but before I could say a word, she yanked my brown leather bag out of my hand, the last gift my mother had given me, and walked away. "Renata, my documents," I called after her, my voice trembling. She didn't look back. She just kept walking, her blonde hair catching the airport lights like a shampoo commercial. For a moment, I hoped this was just a fit of anger, but it wasn't. She walked straight through security without a backward glance. That was when I realized my boarding pass was useless without the documents she'd stolen. She had planned this. She wanted to humiliate me one last time and leave me stranded in a foreign country. A wave of panic rose inside me. Denial first, then rage, and finally pure terror that made my knees buckle. I was in a strange land with no passport, no money, no phone, and no one who knew where I was. I approached a security guard struggling to explain in broken English. They looked at me suspiciously. One of them started to make a call. Then I sensed someone standing beside me. A tall man with neatly combed silver hair and a perfectly tailored gray suit leaned slightly toward me. His amber-brown eyes were filled with a mixture of curiosity and recognition. Speaking in gentle English, he asked, "Are you in trouble?" Before I could respond, his tone dropped steady. "Urgent. Pretend to be my wife. My driver is coming. Trust me, ask questions later." He took my hand lightly and whispered, "Your daughter will regret leaving you here. I promise." I looked at him, then at the approaching guards, then at the vast cold terminal around me, and made the most reckless decision of my life. I gripped his hand and said, "Take me with you," because in that moment I realized I had spent my whole life waiting for others to save me. My husband, my daughter, and they had all abandoned me. Maybe it was time to take the hand of a stranger and see who I was when I had no one left to rely on. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, elegant yet discreet. The driver wearing white gloves stepped out and opened the back door. The man gestured toward me. "Please." I got in. The cabin smelled of new leather and polished wood. The seat was so soft I sank into it, a shocking contrast to the chaos of a few minutes ago. He closed the door, and silence filled the air as the car started moving. I watched the airport lights fade in the rearview mirror. Reality hit me. I had just climbed into a stranger's car in a foreign country. "Take a deep breath," he said without looking at me. "I know this is insane, but you're safe now." "Why are you helping me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned toward me, and in the dim cabin light, I saw the wrinkles around his eyes, a thin scar above his eyebrow, and the quiet weariness of someone who had seen too much loss. "My name is Khaled Rashid," he said. "I'm 72, born in Saudi Arabia, but I lived 20 years in the US. I run companies in Dubai, New York, and Los Angeles. I lost my wife 8 months ago." His voice slowed on that last sentence. I recognized that kind of pain. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He nodded. "I saw your daughter take your bag. I saw the way she smiled. I know that cruelty. My son wears the same smile when he tries to outsmart me. So you help strangers because of that?" I asked. He straightened his cuff calmly. "I need an exchange. Nothing immoral. I need you to pretend to be my wife for a few hours, maybe a few days." I almost laughed, but the seriousness in his face silenced me. "You can't be serious." "I am," he said simply. "Tomorrow I have a meeting with very conservative investors. They don't trust widowers. They think we're unstable, too emotional. My wife always attended those meetings with me. Without her, I lose credibility. I can't afford to lose this deal. It's worth $400 million. The numbers stunned me. "You could hire an actress." "I tried," he said. "But they looked exactly like what they were paid performers. No one believed them. But you have the eyes of someone who has truly lost something. They'll believe you." "This is madness," I muttered. "Yes," he agreed. "But do you really have another choice? Go back to the airport with no ID, call your daughter, the one who just abandoned you, or accept my offer. Stay in a safe room, eat a decent meal, and talk again in the morning." He was right. I had nowhere else to go. The more I thought, the angrier I became, not at him, but at Renata, the daughter who had made me so helpless. I now had to take the hand of a stranger to survive. "If I agree," I asked softly. "What exactly do you want me to do tomorrow?" "You just have to dress elegantly, smile beside me for a few hours at dinner, act comfortable. No affection needed, just quiet familiarity, the kind shared by people who've known each other a long time. Don't deny anything I say." He paused, then added, "In return, I'll provide lodging, meals, a phone so you can contact anyone you want. And when this is over, you'll receive $15,000. $15,000. That was 5 months of my pension, more than I'd seen in years. I studied him. "Why should I trust you?" He gave a faint smile. "You don't have to, but ask yourself, do you have any other option? If I meant to harm you," he continued, "would I be giving you money of phone-clear terms? I could take you anywhere, but I'm being honest, because for some strange reason, I think we might help each other." The car turned onto a gleaming bridge, the city of Dubai shining ahead like a jewel in the desert. Skyscrapers pierced the clouds, lights glittering in the night. A world far removed from anything I'd ever known. Maybe that was exactly what I needed. because the world I came from, the world where I was a quiet, obedient mother, content to take whatever scraps of affection were left, had thrown me away. I looked at Khaled, really looked at him. He was exhausted too, holding his empire together, while the people who should have loved him betrayed him instead. I saw in him the same loneliness I carried, the kind that comes when your own child sees you as a burden. All right, I heard myself say, I'll be your wife, but on one condition. He raised an eyebrow. What's that? You helped me find out what my daughter has done. She brought me here just to abandon me. And once I know the truth, I swallowed hard. You helped me make sure she never does it to anyone else again. Khaled extended his hand. We have a deal, Denise. I took it. In that moment, I knew I had stepped into a turning point I could never undo. When the ground disappears beneath you, sometimes the only thing left to do is learn how to fly, even if it means flying alongside a stranger. Khaled's villa was on Palm, JRA, the man-made island shaped like a palm tree that I'd only ever seen in magazines. The gate opened automatically, revealing a cobblestone driveway lit by tiny lights embedded in the ground. Tall palm trees lined the path toward the house, a blend of traditional Arabic and modern architecture. White archways, massive glass windows, and a turquoise-lit fountain shimmered in the courtyard. As I stepped out of the car, the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine, mixing with the warm desert air. My feet in simple sandals touched the cool marble, and I suddenly worried I'd dirty the floor. A woman in her 40s appeared at the entrance. She wore a deep purple dress and a silk scarf, her eyes calm and kind. This is Mara, Khaled said. She's the housekeeper, worked for me for years in Europe. It's a pleasure, Mrs. Denise, she said in a gentle, accented voice. Your room is ready. You must be exhausted. Exhausted didn't even begin to describe it. Before I followed her upstairs, Khaled lightly touched my arm. You'll need clothes. Tomorrow, Mara will take you shopping for the dinner event. For now, get some rest. He hesitated, then added, Thank you, Denise. I know this is strange, but you won't regret it. I climbed the marble staircase behind Mara, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet. The guest room was larger than my entire living room back home. White sheets like clouds, a deep soaking tub, a balcony overlooking the dark glittering sea, a white robe and slippers waited by the bed. Whenever you need anything, just press this button, Mara said, pointing to a small control panel. I'll bring you tea and something light to eat. You haven't had dinner, have you? After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and began to cry. Not polite tears, but deep, guttural sobs that came from years of being pushed down. I cried for myself, for Renata, for everything. I didn't know if I was brave or simply insane. Mara returned later with a silver tray mint tea, warm bread dates, and a few slices of cheese. I ate automatically, the familiar tastes grounding me. Then I remembered Khaled had promised me a phone. I went downstairs barefoot, following the sound of his voice from his study. He was speaking Arabic, his tone commanding and authoritative. When he saw me, he motioned for me to come in. He ended the call and handed me a new phone, still in its box with an international SIM card. You can call anywhere. This is my number. If you need anything, call me. I held it as if it were treasure. I immediately dialed my sister Eleanor in Ohio. Though it was still dawn there, she picked up right away. Her sleepy voice turned panicked. Denise, oh my God, where are you? Renata called. She said, You disappeared at the airport. Disappeared. I could feel my blood boiling. She said, You two argued, and when she turned around, you were gone. She's worried sick. Eleanor paused. Denise, what's going on? I told her everything, every detail. There was silence on the other end, the heavy kind that comes before a storm. She lied, Eleanor said. Finally, her voice trembling with anger. And honestly, I'm not surprised. There's something you need to know. My chest tightened. What 3 months ago, Renata called me. She asked about the value of your house, said you were losing your mind and that she needed to protect the family's assets before you did something reckless. She wanted me to sign papers declaring you legally incompetent. That side, I froze. Did you sign them? Of course not, Eleanor nearly shouted. I kicked her out of my house. But Denise, she said something that gave me chills. She said, Mom killed Dad and she's going to pay for it even if it takes me the rest of my life to make her pay. The room seemed to shrink around me. She really believes that, I whispered. Believes killed my husband. No one's to blame, my sister said softly. It was an accident. He lost control. No, I said, my throat tightening. He'd been drinking. The report made it clear, but I hid that from Renata. She was 15. I didn't want her to grow up hating her father. I lied. I told her the accident was caused by a mechanical failure. She had always idolized her father, always compared me to him, and I was always the one who came up short. Then she started to believe it was my fault he left. That night we argued and he stormed out. He never came back. Eleanor was silent for a long time before asking the only question that mattered. So what will you do now? I looked around the elegant room, thought of Khalid downstairs, and thought of Renata, probably already on her way back to the U.S., convinced she'd gotten rid of me. I'll survive, I said firmly. I'll help Khalid take the money, and then I'll go back to face her with the truth. All of it. I sat there in the dark thinking. For 25 years, I had carried the guilt of my husband's death and endured my daughter's contempt as punishment. But that night, in the foreign stillness of Dubai, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe anger, or maybe it was because, for the first time in decades, someone looked at me not as a guilty mother, but as a human being worth saving. I lay down on the bed soft as a cloud and finally fell asleep. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the silk curtains. The ocean shimmered beyond the balcony, and a new determination rose in me. Renata wanted me to pay for the past, so I'd start collecting what the present owed me with interest. Mara knocked on the door, bringing breakfast Turkish coffee, fresh fruit, and the news that I had 3 hours to become the wife of a billionaire. I looked in the mirror at my tangled silver hair, my hollow eyes, the wrinkles etched deep into my skin. But Mara knew exactly what to do. She took me to a luxury boutique in the Dubai Mall, where the staff's attitude shifted the moment they heard the name Khalid Rashid. I tried on dozens of dresses, each one more expensive than several months of my pension, until I chose a deep navy gown, elegant, slimming, and confident. The kind of composure years in hotel management had taught me. Mid-heel shoes, a strand of pearls, my hair swept into a neat bun. When I looked at my reflection, I barely recognized myself, not because I looked different, but because it had been so long since I dressed for me, not to please anyone else. We returned home. Khalid was swimming in the pool, each stroke powerful and precise. When he stepped out of the water, I noticed faint scars across his body, stories he hadn't told. Perfect, he said, wrapping a towel around himself. They'll believe it instantly. Khalid, I called as he started to walk away. I need to know about your wife, the one I'm supposed to be. He turned, his expression softening. Lila, my wife, died of cancer. 8 months of agony, draining everything emotionally and financially. The experimental treatments in Switzerland cost a fortune. He sank onto the lounge chair, looking older than his years. My son Rashid saw it as weakness. He tried to make me sign over power of attorney to take control of the company while I was still alive. I refused. After that, he started spreading rumors saying I was senile, unfit to lead. Tomorrow's deal is my only chance to prove I'm still capable. But those investors are extremely conservative. A lonely widower hour doesn't inspire trust. They think I'll act recklessly, make desperate decisions. Khalid let out a humorless laugh. And maybe I did. I let you into my car. Point taken. I said, we spent the entire afternoon rehearsing. He told me about his company, which imported and exported luxury fabrics and spices, headquartered in Riyadh with branches in 15 countries. He taught me the names of his partners and the details of our fictional marriage we had to keep consistent. That we met at a conference in Rio 30 years ago. That he had a son named Rashid. I had a daughter named Ranatata. And we honeymooned in Santorini. All elegant lies. Yet between those practice lines, bits of truth slipped through. Khalid told me Laya had loved gardening. Her hands could make roses bloom in the desert. In her final days, she'd held his hand and said, "Don't let Rashid destroy what we built." I told him about my husband George, a brilliant civil engineer who understood the limits of bridges, but not his own. I told him there were debts after George died, debts I paid in silence, even when it meant selling the ranch I grew up on. Ranata never knew the real cost. I also told him I'd kept every receipt and transfer in a box back home because one day I might need proof that I wasn't the useless mother she believed I was. Has she accused you of anything else? Khaled asked. I nodded. At the airport, she said her father died trying to escape me, that I was the burden he couldn't stand. And you believed that for 25 years? He asked softly. I looked out at the dark, glittering water. Not anymore. Now I know George died because he was drunk, driving nearly 100 miles an hour on an empty road after learning his project had collapsed. He died because he was too proud to ask for help, too weak to face failure. Does Ranata know no? But maybe it's time. Caleb nodded. Tomorrow after dinner, I'll transfer the $15,000 I promised, but I can help you with more. What kind of help? My lawyer can secure your assets in the U.S. Make sure Ranatata can't declare you incompetent or sell your home or seize anything that belongs to you. He stood up. I have a feeling this fight is just beginning. And he was right, though neither of us knew how brutal it would become. That evening, while I was getting ready for the investor dinner, my phone buzzed. A text from Renata. I've reported you missing. I've filed for emergency guardianship and I'm pushing for temporary control of your assets. Come home now and cooperate or you'll never control anything again. I read the message twice, then smiled for the first time in 25 years because she had no idea I had proof I had allies and that the weak woman she once knew had died at the Dubai airport that day. What remained was someone else, entirely a woman, with nothing left to lose. That night, we arrived at the restaurant on the top floor of the Burj Al Arab, the sail-shaped tower stretching out into the sea. We rode there in a Rolls-Royce because, as Khaled said, a Mercedes would be too ordinary for the occasion. 3 Arab investors were waiting around 60, dressed impeccably, their eyes sharp. Khaled introduced me in Arabic, then in English, his hand resting lightly on my back, a gesture both protective and appropriately intimate. When he pulled out my chair, our eyes met, and for a moment I saw genuine gratitude there. Most of the conversation was in Arabic. I smiled when needed, sipped water, listened. One man, Ibrahim, twisted a ring on his pinky finger while thinking. The second, Muhammad, laughed loudly and slapped the table whenever he agreed. The third, Fasizel, said almost nothing, his eyes keen like a hawk's. It was Faisal who turned to me and spoke in accented English. Mrs. Rashid, your husband says you have experience in hospitality. Tell us about it. The table fell silent. Khalid tensed slightly. I set down my glass, took a slow breath, and decided to answer with the truth. I worked 32 years in the hotel industry from front desk to operations manager at a 4-star hotel in Florida, supervising over 90 employees. When I left, our occupancy rate was 94%. And we held the Excellence Award 8 years in a row. They were quiet for a moment. Then Ibrahim asked, "Why did you leave?" I could have lied, but I looked at Khaled and saw the same exhaustion I felt, the exhaustion of living behind masks. "My husband died," I said simply. "I had to raise my daughter. When she grew up, I realized I'd forgotten who I was beyond being a mother and a widow. So I retired early and disappeared from the world." The table was silent. Mahmoud stopped laughing and Fisazel tilted his head, reassessing. Finally, Ibrahim nodded. "Honesty rare in our business," he murmured. The atmosphere eased after that. They began discussing plans to open a boutique hotel chain across the Middle East. Khaled presented projections, figures, strategies. When he paused, Ibrahim asked, "Does your wife agree with this investment?" The unscripted question caught him off guard. I glanced at the tablet on the table, scanning the numbers. 30 years in hospitality had trained my eye. "Your projections for Dubai are too optimistic," I said calmly, "but Oman is undervalued. There's untapped potential there." The room went silent. Khaled looked at me, surprised and impressed. Then Ibrahim laughed heartily. "Khaled, my friend your wife understands the business better than half our advisors. Well, sign, but on the condition that she reviews the Oman plan." 3 hours later, we returned to the villa. The $400 million deal was signed. I, the woman once abandoned in an airport, had just helped close it. Khaled poured 2 glasses of tamarind juice, and we sat on the terrace overlooking the sea. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I shouldn't have interfered. I ruined your script." He turned to me, a real smile spreading across his face. "Rude Denise, you saved me. Ibrahim was testing if you were genuine. You passed." I smiled. 30 years in the industry teaches you to spot mistakes, not instinct. Talent, he said. Then he set his glass down, his voice slower. "I have a proposal, and it's not pretend." My stomach tightened. "What kind of proposal? Marry me for real?" 6 months a legal contract. Hear me out first. You'll receive $850,000 deposited into a private account, untouchable. You'll live here as a consultant for our hotel projects, earning $35,000 a month. Full legal protection. My lawyer will ensure Renata can't touch your assets back in the U.S. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "Because Rashid is trying to remove me from the company. A real marriage with a wife active in the business will crush the narrative that I'm frail or isolated." And he looked into my eyes, "Because I see in you something I haven't seen in years. A person who understands my world and can help me defend it. After 6 months, we'll divorce amicably. You'll keep the money, the connections, your independence. Go back to America or stay. It's your choice. But I promise Renata will never make you feel small again. You'll have real freedom." I looked at him. The offer was outrageous beyond imagination, but in his eyes, I saw my own reflection. Wealthy yet lonely, betrayed by family, clinging to the last remnants of dignity. "I have conditions," I said steadily. "First, your lawyer doesn't just protect my assets. He investigates Renata. If she sold my house, illegally forged documents, or committed any crime, I want proof." Khaled nodded. "Done. Second, this is strictly a business marriage. Separate rooms, separate lives, and we only appear together when necessary. Mutual respect, nothing more." Agreed completely. Third, I hesitated, then spoke. "If I ever become a burden, if I make you regret this, let me go. I've spent my whole life being seen as a burden to my daughter. I won't live that way again." Khaled set his glass down, looked straight at me, and gently placed both hands on my shoulders. Denise, you are not a burden. You never were. Your daughter created that story to justify her cruelty. But I've seen you today smart, strong, and worthy of living your life again." He smiled. "I accept all your conditions, but I have one of my own. You must promise to stop apologizing for existing." Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from a feeling I had almost forgotten the name of. Maybe it was hope. "We have a deal," I whispered. 3 days later, Khaled and I signed the marriage papers at a government registry office in Dubai under a 6-month contract. The ceremony was cold and quick, attended only by a few professional witnesses. No flowers, no music, no romance, just signatures on papers that changed the course of my life. When I returned to the villa as Denise Rashid, I took a photo of our marriage certificate and sent Renata a single text. "I'm alive. I'm married. And from now on, you have no power over me. See you in America when I decide to return." Her reply came instantly. "Have you lost your mind?" I smiled at the screen. Maybe, but it was the cessed madness of my life. The next 4 months were the most intense I had ever lived. Khaled hadn't been joking when he said I would actually be working. On the second day after our marriage registration, I was already sitting in meetings reviewing blueprints for hotels still under construction. At 68, my schedule suddenly became busier than I ever thought possible. I woke up at 6 a.m., drank a quick coffee, and joined online meetings with architects across 3 continents. Lunches turned into working meals where I was introduced not as Mr. Rashid's wife, but as a hotel operations consultant. I rediscovered talents that had slept for years. My time managing the Excelsior Hotel had not just kept me afloat, it had sharpened my eye for efficiency process and detail. I took the Oman project I'd first commented on at that investor dinner and turned it into a full feasibility study. When I presented it, Sheikh Ibrahim was so impressed that he asked me to fly to meet the local partners and report in person. I flew alone to Muscat wearing a sand-colored suit Mara had picked out, carrying a tablet with the presentation I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting. 10 men initially looked at me like I was decorative. 15 minutes later, they were taking notes. 30 minutes later, they were asking about seasonal occupancy rates and operational cost management. I closed the deal on my own. When I returned to Dubai, Khaled was waiting with non-alcoholic champagne and a smile that lit up his tired face. "You're extraordinary," he said. "I was afraid you'd be intimidated, but you were brilliant." You know, he continued pouring more champagne. Ibrahim said, "You have more strategic vision than the consultants he pays $50,000 per report." I took a sip and felt something long-lost pride. Not the kind that comes from pleasing others, but the kind that comes from proving yourself. Meanwhile, back in the US, Renata was losing control. Eleanor, my sister, kept me updated. Renata had filed a petition in court claiming I was being manipulated by a foreign man. She tried to freeze my bank accounts, tried to finalize the sale of my house, but ran straight into the legal team. Khaled had assembled 3 lawyers sharp and relentless, dismantling every move she made, with documents I hadn't even known existed. Then I learned the truth. Khaled's legal team uncovered enough evidence to take Renata to court evidence, detailed in a report so thick it made my hands shake just holding it. I didn't read it once. I read it again and again until the denial finally died. "We can press criminal charges," the lead attorney, Mr. Harrison, said during a virtual meeting. "Forgery, embezzlement, and fraud. She could face between 2 and 6 years in prison." I stayed silent, staring at the documents. That was my daughter, the child I once cradled in my arms, the teenager who had cried on my shoulder when her father died, and now the woman who had stolen everything I owned. Finally, I spoke quietly. "Not yet. Keep everything, but don't act." Khaled looked at me surprised. Why she deserves to be punished. Yes, but if I act now, people will say you manipulated me. They'll claim I'm seeking revenge out of emotion. I need to go back to America, look her in the eye, and let her see that I am her equal, not her victim. If she still tries to destroy me after that, then I'll strike back. Khaled smiled faintly. You really are a strategist. 30 years of dealing with difficult hotel guests comes in handy, I said. Renata is just another client. The only difference is that this time I can fire her. That night, I sat alone at my laptop and wrote a letter not to Renata, but to myself. I listed every sacrifice, every lie I had swallowed. Every time I'd made myself smaller so she could feel bigger, not to complain, but to remember. To never forget the cost of loving a child who turned affection into manipulation. Meanwhile, my life in Dubai began to bloom in ways I never imagined. Mara and I became close friends. She taught me how to cook Middle Eastern dishes, sharing stories of her life, a failed marriage in Portugal, and the decision to run away and start anew in Dubai. I met other women at social events, all expatriates like me. We formed a small circle meeting every Thursday for coffee and conversation. Ingrid, a 65-year-old Danish woman, told us she divorced at 60 after years of abuse and now owned a thriving art gallery. Yuki, a 71-year-old Japanese woman, ran 3 restaurants after being thrown out by her children, who had called her a burden. Their stories were different, but the pain was the same. Each of us had once been made to feel invisible, disposable, until we stood up and reclaimed our space. One day, Ingrid said while holding her teacup, "You know, Denise, loneliness from being abandoned hurts far more than loneliness you choose. I'd rather be alone and be myself than surrounded by people who make me small." I held on to that sentence like a lifeline. When the 4th month of our marriage came, Khaled called me into his office. His tone was calm, serious, just like the day we met. "The contract has 2 months left. I need to know what you plan to do after." The question stunned me because I truly had a choice. I had money, a career, and a life of my own. I'm not sure I admitted. I need to return to the U.S. to settle things with Renata to close that chapter. Then I looked at him. I think I want to come back not as a wife, but as a partner. I want to keep working to finish the Omen project. Khaled smiled a rare smile that made him look years younger. Then we'll have much to discuss about renewing the contract, but fate always finds a way to interfere. 3 days later, as I was reviewing the Muscat Hotel blueprints, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. Her voice was tense. "Denise, Renata is coming to Dubai. She bought a ticket. She lands tomorrow." I felt my blood turn to ice. How does she know where I live? No idea, but she's furious. She's posting online saying she's going to rescue her mother from an international con artist. She's rallying people, turning it into a spectacle. Eleanor paused. "Denise, she's coming for a fight." I hung up, gripping the phone tightly, my breath heavy. Renata wanted war, then war she would've. But this time, the battlefield was mine and I held weapons she didn't even know existed. And if God still had mercy to give, he'd better give it to her, because I had none left. She arrived like a storm. No doorbell, no warning. She waited for a flower delivery to enter through the gate, then marched in heels, clicking sharply against the polished stone, the sound echoing through the hall. I was in the living room reviewing contracts when I heard her shout my name. Khaled was in his office. Mara ran over in panic, but I gestured for her to stop. I took a deep breath, straightened my ivory linen dress, and stepped into the foyer. Renata stood there, her blonde hair tangled dark circles under her eyes, smudged makeup, wrinkled jeans, nothing of the polished woman she once was. But it was her eyes that froze me, the burning hatred that had been brewing for years. I thought I'd have to call the police to get into your billionaire husband's fortress." She screamed, her voice sharp and venomous. "Once, those words might have broken me." "Not now, Renata," I said calmly. "You just trespassed on private property. You didn't even bother to ring the bell." "A bell," she sneered, stepping closer, pointing a finger at me. "You disappear for 4 months, marry a stranger, and now you're lecturing me on manners. I just expect you to behave like an adult." "An adult." She threw her purse to the floor. The sound cracked like a thunder. "I know what you're doing. You sold yourself to this old rich man, and now you think you can humiliate me, erase me." Khalid stepped out from the upper floor. Renata's eyes flared with raw hatred. "So it's you, the scam artist, who brainwashed my mother." Khalid's voice turned icy. "Watch your words. I'm your mother's legal husband with full documentation and witnesses." Renata laughed bitterly. "My mother is 68, lost at an airport, and suddenly marries a billionaire. Any judge would call that manipulation. Any judge would look at the facts," I replied, still calm. "And the facts are, you deliberately abandoned me, canceled my ticket, took my documents and money and disappeared just to teach me a lesson." Renata screamed, and the mask she'd worn for years finally shattered. "Yes, to make you see you can't keep draining me, manipulating me, using me like your personal ATM." The reversal stunned me for a few seconds. "I manipulated you?" I asked. Renata trembled, eyes blazing. "You made me feel guilty my whole life. Guilty for being born. Guilty for needing things. Guilty for surviving while Dad died running from you." "Your father didn't run," I said. But she shouted, "Don't lie." Then she grabbed a ceramic vase from the table and hurled it against the wall. The crash echoed through the hall. Mara rushed in, terrified, and Khalid started down the stairs. But I signaled for them to stop. I needed to see this through. "You killed my father." Renata said, her voice low but venomous, with your nagging, your bitterness, your mediocrity. "He was brilliant. He could have gone far. But you dragged him down, locked him in that tiny house, that tiny life with a tiny wife. And when he tried to breathe, you pushed him down that road." "You're wrong," I said slowly. "I was home when your father left. You know that." "Yes, you were home, as always, resentful, heavy, always a burden." The room fell into thick silence. Khalid wanted to step in, but I raised my hand. This was the moment to say everything. Before I could speak, Renata bent down, pulled a stack of papers from her bag. "I came prepared," she said, regaining some composure. "I have proof that you're being exploited, that this marriage is a scam. He's just after your money." She paused, smirking. "Or whatever's left after you squandered Grandma's inheritance." The words hit like a punch to the stomach. "Grandma's inheritance?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You mean the ranch I sold to pay off the debts of the father you idolized squandered?" "Yes, yes," she shouted. "That ranch was worth $2,800,000 and you sold it. The money vanished. You didn't invest. You didn't build. You didn't plan for the future. Where is it?" "All of it went to pay your father's debts." She froze. "Lies." I stepped closer. "No. He owed contractors, suppliers, investors more than $2,400,000. I found out after the funeral. And do you know what happens if those debts aren't paid? They sue the widow, seize the house, and erase the family's name. I sold the ranch, every acre of red soil your grandmother farmed for 50 years. I paid every debt and kept just enough for your education." Renata's fists clenched. "Liar. The insurance paid for my college. The insurance was $85,000, barely enough for the funeral and 3 months of expenses. Your tuition was $5,300 a month for 5 years. Who do you think paid the rest?" I stepped closer now, only a few feet away. "I worked double shifts, skipped meals so you'd have food when you came home. I wore old clothes so you wouldn't be embarrassed standing next to me at your graduation. Renata's face went pale, but she didn't back down. If you really did all that, you would have bragged about it long ago. I looked straight at her. Because I loved you more than my own pride. I thought one day you'd understand that love doesn't have to be shouted to be real. Love. She laughed, but it broke halfway through. You call it love when you suffocate me. Make me feel like I owe you for existing. I never asked you for anything. You didn't have to ask, I said quietly. You demanded it through silence. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You've always played the saint, always the victim, always comparing me to Dad, saying he'd be proud of you. I've been nothing but his shadow in your eyes. And in that moment, I understood. For 25 years, she hadn't hated me over money. She'd hated that she'd spent her life competing with a dead man. And I, trying to fill the void George left behind, had unknowingly used his memory as a weapon that wounded my own child. You're right, I said, and saw Renata freeze. I did that. I made your father the measure of everything. That was my mistake. She softened for a second, but I continued my tone, turning cold. But that mistake doesn't excuse what you've done. You illegally sold my house, forged my signature, took out loans in my name, and abandoned me in a foreign country. Renata stammered. I was going to come back for you. Liz Khaled interrupted, descending the stairs, tablet in hand. We have evidence. Bank records show you transferred $680,000 into your joint account with your husband. And here are the messages between the two of you, planning to keep your mother out of the country long enough to claim everything legally. Renata turned ghostly white. How did you get that I looked at her? Because you underestimated me. You had no idea who your mother would become once she stopped apologizing for being alive. She stared at me for a long moment, and the hatred in her eyes gave way to fear. She stepped back, tripping slightly over the carpet. You're lying. She tried to shout, but her voice shook. You couldn't possibly have my private messages. Khaled swiped the screen, zoomed in, and handed it to her. The familiar interface showed every line clearly. I've delayed my mother's flight. Need 2 more days to finalize the house sale. If she returns early, say she's mentally unstable. I have 2 doctor friends ready to sign a competency report if necessary. Renata stared at the screen, her lips trembling. This is a violation of privacy. It's not admissible. It is, came a man's voice from the doorway. Mr. Harrison stepped in wearing a gray suit, a leather briefcase in hand. Mrs. Denise granted me full legal authority to investigate any criminal activity involving her assets. All this evidence was obtained legally. He placed the briefcase on the table, opening it to reveal neatly organized documents. The forged power of attorney was notarized through bribery. The notary has confessed. The fraudulent property sale was undervalued to evade taxes. There are credit applications using the victim's ID, and more than $120,000 in vehicle loan proceeds were misappropriated. He removed his glasses, fixing his gaze on Renata. We have sufficient grounds for charges of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement, carrying a combined sentence of 6 to 12 years in prison. Renata gripped the edge of a chair, her face ashen. No, I'm a doctor. I have a reputation. You did, I said softly. Once the medical board receives these documents, they'll open an investigation and your license could be suspended or revoked. She looked at me as if I were a monster. You'd really do that, destroy your own daughter? The question echoed through the quiet house. Khaled, Mara, and Mr. Harrison all waited for my answer. I took 3 deep breaths before speaking. I don't know. I saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes because part of me still remembers the part that stayed up all night when you had a fever. The part that kept every drawing you made in elementary school now tucked in that old shoebox in the house you sold. Tears rolled down Renata's cheeks, but they weren't from remorse. They were from rage. So this is blackmail. If I don't obey you, you'll ruin me. No, I said, stepping toward the desk. I opened a drawer and pulled out a worn leather folder. I brought this from America. You never knew it existed, and I'm giving you something you never gave me the truth. I placed it in her hands. Renata opened it, her fingers trembling. Inside was everything. The college tuition invoices, the bank transfer slips, George's debt repayment contracts, the deed of sale for my mother's ranch, all fully documented. The last page was the forensic report, one I had never shown anyone. Cause of death, cranial trauma, due to motor vehicle accident. Blood test results. Blood alcohol content, 4 times the legal limit. Conclusion. Driver was severely intoxicated. Renata read it once, then again, her hands shaking so hard the paper rustled. No, Dad didn't drink like that. You're making this up. The original report is still archived at the county medical examiner's office. Case number 41780, I said steadily. You can verify it yourself. Your father left the house at 10 p.m. After learning his project had gone bankrupt, he drank an entire bottle of whiskey one he'd been saving for the celebration and drove off into the dark at reckless speed. He wasn't running from me, I said, my voice cracking. He was running from his own shame. I tried to stay calm, but my voice shook. George was brilliant, but also arrogant, impulsive, incapable of admitting mistakes. When his project collapsed, and he realized how many people had lost everything because of him, he couldn't face it, and I hid the truth from you because you were 15. Finally, the words burst out of me, echoing through the house, because I was broken, because I cried every night calling his name. How could I tell my grieving daughter that her father died drunk, leaving me with debts that took 10 years to pay? The room fell silent. Even Renata stopped breathing for a moment. I took a deep breath, my voice lowering. I swallowed the truth, the anger, and the injustice of having to protect the honor of the man who left me in ruins. I worked myself to exhaustion, forgot what rest meant, because you needed both a mother and a father, even though he had never truly been either. Renata collapsed onto the sofa, the folder slipping from her hands, papers scattering across the floor like fragments of morning. I didn't know, she whispered, because I never asked, because blaming you was easier. I looked at her. So what now? Do you plan to sue me, destroy me? I glanced around the grand room, at Colette, at Mr. Harrison, then back at Renata. I'll give you a choice, I said slowly. Repay every dollar you stole. Legalize the house sale or buy it back at market value. Cancel the loans in my name. Return the car you registered to yourself, including interest. I don't have that kind of money. Then sell what you bought with it. Take out a loan refinance, whatever it takes. You're a doctor. You have an income. Pay it back over 5 years if you must, but pay it. If I do that, you won't press charges. If you do that, if you publicly admit what you did and apologize, I paused, weighing every word. I won't press charges. But from now on, our relationship ends. You'll only be my daughter by blood. You'll inherit nothing. You'll have no say in my life, no power over me ever again. Renata's voice broke. But I'm your only daughter. And I was once your only mother, I replied. And you left me at an airport like garbage. This time her tears were real. Her shoulders shook violently. A part of me, the mother who had lived for 33 years, wanted to hold her, to forgive, to slip back into that old role of enduring for peace. But I didn't. I chose to keep my dignity. You have 72 hours to decide, Mr. Harrison said, gathering the documents. After that, proceed with criminal charges. Renata stumbled out of the house without looking back. When the door closed, I sank into the chair she just occupied and cried harder than I had since George's funeral. Khaled sat beside me silent. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Then why does it hurt so much? Because motherhood isn't a switch you can turn off," he said softly. "But it does have a limit, the point where you finally protect yourself. And today, you found it." I sat there in the stillness that follows irreversible choices, knowing I had crossed a line I could never return from. Strangely, I had never felt freer. 3 heavy days passed. Renata didn't call, didn't text, didn't reply. Mr. Harrison called daily asking if he should file the charges. I kept asking for 24 more hours, then another 24 clinging to the faint hope she'd choose to do the right thing. On the 4th day, Khaled called me into his office. He sat behind his large wooden desk, his posture tense, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something," he began, fingers interlaced, "and it will change everything between us." My stomach tightened. After 4 months in this foreign world, I knew sentences like that never led to good news. "What is it?" "Do you remember when we met at the airport and I told you I needed a legal wife to appear in meetings? That was true, but not the whole truth." I stood up facing him. "Explain." Khaled sighed. "My son Rashid isn't just trying to take over the company. He's filed a petition in court claiming I'm mentally unfit. He says my grief has affected my judgment. And here the law tends to favor the children. But you're perfectly sound." I said, "You and I both know that." "We do. But Rashid hired 3 psychiatrists willing to certify otherwise. If he wins, I lose control of the company, my accounts, my properties, even my freedom to travel." His voice dropped. Our marriage wasn't just a business arrangement. It was legal proof of competency. A man capable of marrying, signing contracts, maintaining a stable relationship cannot be declared incompetent. I stood still. He had used me more subtly than Renata, but still used me. "You manipulated me." "Not in the way you think," Khaled said, stepping around the desk. "Everything I gave you was real. The money, the job, the protection, the respect. I just withheld part of the reason. I'm sorry. Why tell me now? Because the court just ruled." He handed me the documents. Rashid's petition was dismissed. The judge cited my recent marriage and active business involvement as proof of full mental competence. I'm free, and you saved me without even knowing it. I looked at the attached English translation, read it 3 times. "So now you don't need me anymore." "Legally." "No," he admitted, stepping closer. "But beyond the law, yes. You've brought life back into this house, intelligence to the work and companionship I didn't know I needed. Our contract still has 6 weeks left, but I want to propose something else." I looked at him and saw genuine hesitation. "Not another contract or extension," he said. "A real beginning. No roles, no obligations, just 2 people if they choose building something honest." I stayed silent. Part of me wanted to scream that he was just like every other man, but the part of me that had grown in these 4 months knew he was just trying to survive like I once had. "I need time to think," I said. "Of course," he replied. "But know this, what I feel isn't strategy." I left the office, my mind spinning. Standing at the window watching the sunlight shimmer on the sea, I realized I was no longer the fragile woman who had stepped into that Mercedes 4 months ago just to survive. This woman wanted to live fully. The phone rang. Unknown number, U.S. area code. Mom. Renata's voice trembled. "I need to see you. Please, can you come to the hotel where I'm staying?" My first instinct was to refuse, but her voice, shaky, exhausted, raw, made me hesitate. "Which hotel? Atlantis. Room 2847. Please, Mom, it's important." I hung up my hand, still clutching the phone. On one side was Khalid with his half-truth confession. On the other, Ranatada with her desperate plea. I went downstairs and found Khalid reading documents. "Renata wants to meet," I said. "I'm going." He stood immediately. "I'll drive you and wait outside just in case." The drive was silent. When we arrived, he took my hand gently. "Whatever you decide with her, with me, with your life, choose what you truly want, not what's easy, not what's expected." I stepped out of the car, my heart racing, and took the elevator up to the 28th floor. I knocked on the door of room 2847. The door opened. Renata stood there, her hair messy in a bun, wearing a sweatshirt, her face swollen from crying. And sitting on the sofa beside her was Matthew, her husband, an attorney who had helped her file paperwork and cover her tracks. "If he's here," I said immediately, "I'm not stepping inside." "That man needs to leave Renata," I said firmly. "Matthew, get out." Renata shouted, her voice strong enough to make him stand up and walk out without another word. When the door closed, she collapsed onto the sofa and burst into tears, her body trembling. "He left me," she sobbed. "When he found out you had enough evidence to press charges." Matthew packed his bags and left. He said he wouldn't risk his career for my family drama. I stood there, arms crossed, forcing myself not to give in to the old instinct to go and hold her. "So you called me here for pity, no?" She lifted her tearful eyes to meet mine, to ask for forgiveness, a real apology. Not because I'm cornered, but because her voice cracked, because I finally understand what I've done. Understand how. I read every document you gave me, every receipt, every payment, every figure. You worked for nearly 10 years to pay for my education. You sold Grandma's ranch to protect Dad's honor, and I turned all of that into a weapon against you. I nodded slowly. Yes, because it was easier for you to hate me than to face the truth that you spent 25 years worshiping a man who didn't deserve it. Because admitting that would mean accepting you're not the flawless child you thought you were. Maybe you're just human. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. "You're not ordinary, Ranata," I said. "You're a skilled doctor, successful, but you—" I paused, searching for the word. "You've been cruel, selfish, and so obsessed with a competition that never existed between us that you forgot how to be kind." I know she whispered. "And I don't think I deserve forgiveness, but I'll repay everything. I'll sell the car, take loans, work extra shifts. I'll meet every condition you gave me." I sat down across from her, exhausted to the point where every muscle in my body ached. "Why?" "Because he left you. Because you're alone. Because I realized you were alone too," she said softly. "And even then you never abandoned me until I forced you to." We sat there, mother and daughter, separated by 4 months and 25 years of pain. I knew forgiveness couldn't happen instantly, but maybe with time it might come. 2 years later, I sat on the balcony of my apartment in Muscat, watching the sun sink into the Gulf, painting the distant mountains in shades of orange. Next to me was a pile of reports from the hotel we'd opened 3 months earlier, the Alice Mere Boutique, the first in a chain of 5 locations we planned to build, 91% occupancy, a 4.8-star average rating, and first quarter profits exceeding projections. My phone buzzed. A message from Mara, now the general manager of the Dubai branch. "Mrs. Denise, a guest from room 304, asked for you personally. They said they'll return when you're available." I smiled. That was the kind of problem I liked. Khalid stepped onto the balcony holding 2 cups of cardamom tea. He looked a bit older now, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but his expression was lighter than ever. He sat beside me. "The final blueprints for the Salala Hotel just arrived," he said. Do you want to see them today or tomorrow? Tomorrow, I replied. Today, I just want to enjoy this moment. I pointed toward the sea where the sunset glowed crimson, the place where my new life had been rebuilt, brick by brick. Legally, our contract marriage had ended 18 months earlier. But when that day came, neither of us mentioned divorce. Instead, Khaled simply asked, "Would you like to go out for dinner?" We went, and the next morning we both woke up and went back to work as if there had never been an expiration date. There were no dramatic love confessions or movie-style gestures, just quiet companionship, mutual respect and understanding, born from solitude. Rashid called yesterday. Khaled said evenly, "He wants to talk to make peace." And what did you say I told him the door would open when he apologized sincerely, not when he wanted to bargain? He took a sip of tea, smiling faintly. "I learned from you that dignity is never negotiable." My phone buzzed again. A video call from Eleanor. Her face appeared on the screen. Freshly dyed blonde hair, a radiant smile. Guess who's here? The camera turned slightly. Ranatada. She looked completely different. Short hair, no makeup, a simple blouse, and in her hands, a familiar folder. "I brought the final payment," she said softly but firmly. "All loans repaid with interest." And Eleanor witnessed it. Eleanor held up a document to the camera. I checked everything. Denise, she did it down to the last cent. I felt a lump in my throat. Renata had sold her apartment, moved into a rental, taken extra shifts, lived frugally, all to repay what she'd taken. "Thank you for confirming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom." Renata stopped, then corrected herself. "Denise, I don't expect you to see me as your daughter again. I know I destroyed that, but I want you to know I'm trying to become the kind of person you deserve in your life." Khaled placed his hand gently over mine, a quiet, steady warmth. "I see that," I said, "and I respect it. But rebuilding trust takes time, a lot of time." "I understand," she said softly, her eyes glistening but dry. "I don't expect anything else. I just want you to know I'll be here when you're ready." I ended the call and looked out at the darkening sea. Khaled sat quietly beside me. "Will you forgive her?" he asked. "I don't know. Maybe full forgiveness isn't possible," I said, then smiled faintly. "But I can give her the chance to prove she's changed." 3 months later, I launched the New Beginnings Project, a free training center for women over 60 who wanted to return to work. There, they learned computer skills, hotel management, professional cooking, and basic business administration. The first class had 18 students, widows, exhausted women, forgotten souls like me. During the opening session, when I shared my story, everyone cried. A 73-year-old woman raised her hand and asked, "Weren't you afraid to start over at this age?" I laughed gently. I was terrified, but I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing not to let fear control you. The program grew quickly. 6 months later, we added 2 more classes. A year later, For Yuki, my Japanese friend in Dubai, opened a branch in Tokyo. Ingrid, my Danish friend, organized internships at her gallery. We became a global network of women stepping out of the shadows together. Renata came to the opening of the second branch in Miami. She didn't speak to me, just volunteered quietly all day, serving coffee, arranging chairs, helping elderly women fill out forms. When the ceremony ended, our eyes met for a brief moment. No words, no smiles, but in that glance there was something fragile, small yet real, a beginning. Now at 70, I divide my time between Oman, Dubai, and the U. Khaled is still by my side, not as a husband, but as a true companion. We have our own rooms, our own lives, but share dinner whenever we can. On lonely nights, just knowing someone in the next room understands that emptiness is enough. Rashid finally apologized to his father, and they're slowly rebuilding their relationship. As for me, I've learned that starting over doesn't mean erasing the past. It means choosing which parts of it to carry and which to leave behind in the desert where the woman I once was will rest forever. I still think about George sometimes, not with guilt, but with understanding. I loved a flawed man and he loved me in his clumsy way. We both did the best we could with what we had. Renata still texts every Sunday sharing stories about her patients, her therapy sessions. I don't always reply, but I always read them. Forgiveness may not be complete, but watching someone truly try to change, that I can give. Last week, I received a package from the US. Inside was a photo album. Renata had restored all the old pictures my childhood on the ranch. Our wedding rare photos of George smiling and images of her as a little girl. Attached was a small note. I thought you'd want to keep your memories not out of expectation or guilt, but because they're yours. I held the album and cried not from sadness, but from understanding. Memories are ours to keep, but the future is what we choose. And I choose a future where I wake to the sound of waves along the coast of omen-built sanctuaries, for travelers teach women to rediscover their worth. Sip tea beside a man who sees me as his equal, and let my daughter exist at the edge of my life, respected, but no longer its center. Looking back on everything I've realized, love isn't always unconditional sacrifice. Sometimes love means knowing when to stop to protect yourself. Forgiveness doesn't happen in a single day, and family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who stay when you have nothing left to give. It took me years to understand that kindness needs boundaries, and sometimes distance is what allows love to heal. If you've ever been hurt by family, if you've had to rebuild yourself after loss, I hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to start again. What do you think is the difference between forgiving and forgetting? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you'd like to join me in the stories to come, stories of resilience, of love, reborn from brokenness, stay with me as we learn together how to love without losing ourselves.